Meeting is being recorded for use on the internet and our local cable station. If everybody could join me and stand for the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, good evening, everybody. This is Wednesday, November 20th. It's the Board of Selectmen meeting. We are beginning tonight at 6:15 p.m. And we are in the Eldon F. Marrera Board of Selectmen meeting room on the second floor of Town Hall. We have a couple of items before we enter into a joint meeting with the ZBA and the Planning Board. And the first item on the agenda is to ratify Brian Crowell's employment as a water technician. Brian, by process of elimination, I assume that's you in the back of the room. So if you could maybe just quickly say hello, talk about what you've done.
Brian Cole. Lived in this town for 38 years.
That's it.
I just recently left a position at an HVAC company out of Needham, hopefully to find something closer and less commute back towards home.
Awesome.
And hopefully it all works out.
Super. Well, I know the water commissioners and everybody, they've been short for a little while, so looking forward to getting you there and getting you going and moving forward. So any questions from?
Welcome.
Thank you.
Well, not quite yet, in 2 seconds.
Go ahead.
Make a motion to ratify Brian Crowell's appointment as water technician.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Welcome.
Thank
Now.
As Mike said.
Congratulations.
So thank you very much and best of luck. So continuing on the employment trend, if we will. We have Marilyn here, and next on the agenda is to ratify Stephen Beauchamp's employment as COA kitchen assistant. So, would you like to introduce yourself?
I'm Steve Beauchamp. This is my wife Ruth. Town resident. Lived in the town like 17 years now. Love it. And I've been a chef for probably 28 years. I was last the chef at Cafe Francesca here in town. I don't know if anybody of you ever went there, but if you did, you ate for me. Looking forward to helping the Council on Aging.
Super.
Coming out of retirement for this, but you know what? It's going to be a ball. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, as we were saying before the meeting started, there's a great group of people over there and in that kitchen, and
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
always
Maryland's
fun.
got a good crew there. I'm going to be very happy, I think.
So, any comments?
Oh, welcome. I'm excited to go by and check out what you're doing.
You're always welcome.
Make a motion to ratify Stephen Beauchamp's employment as COA kitchen assistant.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Welcome.
Congratulations again.
Thank you very much.
Thank you both
guys.
very, very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay,
And
next
we'll see you
time.
over there.
Yeah, it won't be long.
It's been too many years of doing that.
Congratulations.
Next on the agenda is an application from the Berwick Boys Foundation, request to sell Christmas trees and wreath from November 30th to December 21st.
Yeah, so this is an annual request from them. So the board always signed it as a transient vendor license. The only thing of note is that because they're a not-for-profit, the board historically has also waived any fees.
Okay. I have no issues with that. Marcy, Mike, any discussion?
None at all. I think it's a
No.
great thing. You need a motion here or no motion?
Motion to approve as presented.
Make a motion to approve Berwick Boys Foundation request to sell Christmas trees and wreaths with no fees as presented.
Excellent.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Great. Moving along, we're going to present, approve the meeting minutes for October 16th.
I make a motion to approve the meeting minutes of October 16, 2024.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And accept the meeting minutes of November 6th for review.
Make a motion to accept the meeting minutes of November 6, 2024 for review.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, we have a few more minutes. We'll keep going down the agenda. Communication and reports from boards, commissions, and town officials. I have none. If anybody else does, we'll continue down. Correspondence from the public to determine a course of action. Once again, I have none. I don't know if anybody else does. And then public comment period. Hello, gentlemen. I know we'll be commenting shortly, but anything to add in the general sense? All right, town administrators report.
Thank you. So just a couple of FYIs to the board. One is, you'll recall that in May at annual town meeting approved a digital sign request to the town clerk's office because it's part of what the communications committee that Jeff chairs to try to make sure that we also have better communication to our town residents. I want to give credit first to Linda. The original quote came in at $48,000. We received approval at town meeting for $48,000. It turned out they had not included electrical in it, so it's going to be another $5,000, so assume 53. She then went out to bid and she was able to secure a couple of other lower quotes, and the lowest quote, including electrical, came in at $27,000. So, again, credit to her because she's doing everything she can to make sure we always save the town money. As part of that bidding process, it turned out to come up with something we hadn't thought of, which is that Route 28 is a state road, it's not a local road. So although we may still have to permit locally, we also have to go through the Mass DOT permitting process as well. So we're in that process now. I'm bringing it as an FYI because it's 6 months later and we aren't implementing the sign yet. So we're going through that process. I have no idea if that's a 90-day, 180-day, or whatever the review period will be, but we've initiated that.
Okay.
Follow-up to town meeting. I placed this on just that way, one, it would give everybody an opportunity to be able to speak to it if we wanted to. I thought the meeting was extremely well attended. I thought it was very good. And two items of note as a result is that, as we know, the town made a decision to purchase the property on Howard Street. And as a result, town council is in active negotiations, consultation with the sellers. So we will execute a purchase and sale agreement, go through that process. We have posted with the state as a requirement of law, and so I'll follow back up with you as we complete that. The second is that the town meeting decided not to purchase their first right of refusal, or the town's first right of refusal for the Bryant Street property. And as a result, we will issue a declination notice. And we are in the process of that. I've already spoken to the developer, so he is aware that it is coming. I don't know if you have any other questions about town meeting.
No.
All right. Solid waste. So we have enjoyed, although nobody knows it, but we have enjoyed a very aggressive and town advantageous solid waste contract. We entered that contract a little over 10 years ago. It had no escalation clauses in it for gas, fuel, or hauling. They have attempted multiple times to renegotiate it. We didn't. But unfortunately, that contract now had a opt-out after 10 years. It would have had 2 5-year renewal periods, but seeing that they did not want to continue to cover the cost at no escalation, they have chosen to opt out. So the last 45 days, I have been actively involved with our current vendor and also trying to solicit bids from others. It does expire at the end of this year. So the hope and the intention is to get another contract in place, and then I'll bring it back before the board, because only the board can do a multi-year contract. And the intent is to do it by the end of the year. If for whatever reason we can't, I'll secure something short-term, so that way people could still obviously use the transfer station, but the hope is to get another long-term contract. And the only other last item is, because of the way that calendar works, again, next week will be Thanksgiving, and then after that, our next meeting will be December 4th.
If there's no other discussion, I'll entertain a motion to recess and reconvene back at 6:30. So just take a 5-minute break here.
Make a motion to recess and reconvene at 6:30.
All in favor?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Speed and Time is now 6:30, calling the Board of Selectmen meeting back to order, and we're about to enter into a joint meeting with the Zoning Board of Appeals and the Planning Board. The Planning Board has a quorum, so I'm going to turn the meeting over for a moment to Mr. Hurley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The planning board is here, we do have a quorum, so I'm going to be opening the meeting, although I don't anticipate doing any voting, but we are here with a quorum.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, at this time, we enter into our first of, I'm assuming, several MBTA community plans and updates, but this is our first update, and we're looking forward to Mr. Daniels and what you're here to present. So if you're comfortable there, you can be there. If you're comfortable at the screen, whatever, the room is yours to speak from wherever and however you want. So.
That microphone, that table looks just a little too close. Right, well, next slide, please. My name is Jeff Davis, and I'm with the Horse and Witten Group. And we are, Jeff Daniels is the actor from Dumb and Dumber, but,
I get Jeff.
Well.
Yeah.
My apologies. So we are a firm based in Sandwich. I'm out of our Providence, Rhode Island office, and we are contractors to the Massachusetts Housing Partnership, which is providing free technical assistance to municipalities, including West Bridgewater, related to implementation of the MBTA communities law. Next slide, please. So
If we could, I'm going to ask you to pause for 1 second because we just had another member of the Zoning Board of Appeals walk in. So at this point, I quickly turn the meeting over to Mr. Lucini to call the Zoning Board of Appeals to.
We need to call the zoning board to order this meeting. Oh, we got more, okay, now we're really.
All right, so we have quorum for both the Planning Board and the Zoning Board of Appeals. So both those meetings are open, and I apologize for the interruption, but we are now good to move forward.
It's good to see the interest.
yes, absolutely. So the law, section 3A of 40A, very briefly, I'm sure all of you are quite familiar with it at this point, but the law requires that communities have at least one zoning district that allows multifamily housing by right. And that could mean with a site plan review, but for example, not with a special permit, not with variances and so forth. And that this has to be allowed at least 15 units per acre. For communities that do have a transit station in their vicinity, it needs to be within the half mile of that transit station, or a certain portion does, but of course that's not applicable here in West Bridgewater. It's important that the zoning does not have any age restrictions and it be suitable for families with children. So in other words, there can be no cap on the number of bedrooms or an occupancy cap beyond what's required by the building code. There also has to be parity with other uses, which just simply means whatever you require for multifamily housing, you should be requiring for other uses as well. You should be putting additional restrictions on multifamily housing that don't apply to other types of development. Next slide, please. So what are those targets for West Bridgewater? They are different for every community. The minimum multifamily housing unit capacity, and I'll get into what that means in just a little bit, is 145 units. And basically the state calculated that by taking 5% of the housing units according to the 2020 census here in West Bridgewater. Of course, the minimum gross density, 15 units per acre, that is consistent across all MBTA communities. But because you are an adjacent community and don't have a transit station in your boundaries, you have no minimum land area. It can be as small or as large as you want. There's no location requirement. It can be anywhere in town that you want. And of course, your compliance deadline is next year, December 31st, 2025. Next slide, please. So I want to talk a little bit about what these targets mean, and I find it's often easier to talk about what it does not mean. So, for example, it does not require that multifamily housing be built. The compliance is strictly based on whether you have zoning that would allow multifamily housing. The law does not compel communities to design or pay for new infrastructure to accommodate future multifamily development in the district. It also does not supersede Massachusetts state environmental laws. So I really want to reiterate that this is a menu. Zoning is your menu. giving another option for property owners. It is not a development plan, not a requirement for development. Next slide, please. Also, there are some policy-related standards within the law. First, related to affordable housing. So on top of the targets for multifamily housing and density, the guidelines limit the amount of affordable housing that can be required within the district. So no more than 10% of the units in a development can be affordable, and at no less than 80% of the area median income. Now, there are some exceptions to this. If the town would like, if you establish a 40R district, you can require up to 20% affordable housing. Or, and this is something a number of communities have done, if you conduct an economic feasibility analysis that demonstrates that the housing demand is strong enough in your community that having more than 10% affordable housing would not depress development, the state may allow up to 20% affordable housing. Next slide, please. So I want to talk a little bit more about what the state means when they say unit capacity. So again, this is my 11th community working in this, and this is a confusing point everywhere. So again, to reiterate, this is not about building. It is not about what's there today or what might be there tomorrow. It is simply setting the menu for an option and the opportunity for the property owners within the district. So a lot of communities will ask, well, we already have multifamily housing in our district. Is that going to count towards our goal? I say, no. What you have does not count. Nothing counts. What you build in the future doesn't count. All that counts is that you've got the zoning in place. Next slide, please. So, fortunately, here in Bridgewater, West Bridgewater, you have a core group who has been working on this prior to me coming on. Oftentimes, I'm starting from scratch with the community, and you're not starting from scratch. Your core team has done some excellent work diving into the law, really trying to figure out, if you're going to comply with the law here in West Bridgewater, where would it make the most sense, and what would it look like? So that core group consists of the planning board chair, the zoning board chair, your GIS administrator, the town administrator, the assistant town administrator, and the town planner. And after a lot of trial and error, they are proposing the parcels seen here. So this is located on Route 28, North Main Street. It's 7 parcels on approximately 7.7 acres of land. And the committee chose this place as its preferred alternative for a number of reasons. One, its location near the border with Brockton. One of the advantages of that is that you could see future interconnections with Brockton's utilities. All but one of the parcels here are owned by one person, so there are only 2 property owners within this district, and we'll be talking about them a little more in a minute. Also, a consideration is that Route 28 has less traffic generally than other corridors that had candidate properties like Route 106. And finally, this particular area can accommodate multifamily housing without disrupting existing single-family neighborhoods. So a lot of the surrounding neighbors are actually town-owned property. So for all those reasons and more, this seemed like a prudent area that would meet the requirements of the law while also meeting the town's objectives. Next slide, please. So again, the committee thought about what they would want to see in terms of zoning policies within this district. The properties are located within your business district, your B zoning district, and by and large, you're able to keep your existing dimensional standards that apply to all development in the B zoning district today. Really, the only major differences is one, you would of course allow multifamily by right. That's sort of the crux of the law. Currently, multifamily is not allowed anywhere in town. But a lot of your other standards would apply. So your minimum lot area, your maximum building coverage, your yard setbacks are all the same, proposed to be the same as what you have today in the zoning.
So if I can, real quick, so this would be a new zoning?
So this would be an overlay district.
Okay,
Mhm.
but we're not changing the business zoning, we're just gonna have an overlay
Correct.
for the okay,
Correct.
thank you.
So it would be an overlay zoning district where a lot of the existing standards of the underlying zoning will be maintained.
Yep. Okay.
Next slide, please. Likewise, building height, your parking standards remain the same as what you currently require within the business district. The group is proposing to allow that maximum amount that's allowed by the city or by the state for affordable units. So 10% affordable housing at no more than 80% of the area median income. Still to be determined is what that threshold would be, how many units you would need to build in order to trigger that affordable housing. One thing we should point out again, one of the requirements of the law, of course, is that residential density. And one of the goals of the core group was to get as close to that minimum 145 units required by the state. One thing that Horace Whitten generally recommends in this situation, rather than putting an artificial cap on that residential density, you've already got your building height, your lot coverage, your setbacks, your parking, and frankly, access or not to utilities, whatever that utility capacity is, that ultimately will drive the density that's allowed here. And we think those are better drivers of residential density than putting an artificial cap on. Another very important point is that this area is within your water resource protection district. Now, residential development is allowed in the WRPD, but it also requires a special permit. So that's one thing we're going to have to consider together, since special permits cannot be applied to MBTA communities. We'll have to figure out ways to review development here through the site plan review process that takes into consideration a lot of the same things that you require under the Water Resource Protection District's special permits. I just can't go through that special permit process. Next slide, please. So one of the tools that the state has provided is called the compliance model. And the compliance model is an Excel spreadsheet that's populated and you enter in information about your zoning district and it will tell you whether you're in compliance or not. One thing I try to impart to all my communities is that this is strictly a tool. So it is a tool, you enter the information, and if the numbers come out good at the end, you show that to the state and they say, okay, you're in compliance. But as far as you're concerned, all you need to care about is what your zoning says and if you're comfortable with what the zoning says, because that's what rules the day. This is just a way to show the state that you're in compliance. So we took the information that the core group had provided and recommended and popped it into the model. And the district, again, 7.7 acres, so you have no minimum required. The modeled unit capacity is anywhere from 148 to 172, depending on whether you use a residential density cap. Again, I'm encouraging you not to, but you certainly may. And the dwelling units per acre ends up being about 48, well above the 15 units 15 units per acre that's required. Also, you're in compliance with the affordable housing. You're in compliance with, other policies like not setting limits on bedrooms and unit size and so forth. So all the targets are hit. So in brief, the proposal that your core team has worked on complies with state law, and we hope also maintains the town's priorities. So we hope we found something that works for you. Next slide, please. So in terms of the timeline to compliance, again, this first bullet point, identify proposed zoning district and testing the compliance model. That's normally the first 70% of what I'm doing with the community, and you're there. Obviously, we can still talk about that, but that's a good chunk of work that's represented by that check mark. Next was to notify and schedule a meeting with the property owners, and that has been done. Your planner met with them on October 30th, and that went well. At least in theory, both property owners are open to the idea of this overlay district. And of course, hold an initial board information session, which is what we're doing tonight. Next slide, please. So moving forward, I've been working with Tracy to figure out when would be an appropriate time to hold some public information sessions. We're initially thinking December. I think we'll hold at least one in December, if not two. We may, because of the pending holidays, hold the second one in January. So that is to be determined. But the goal is that very soon, Tracy's been working on amending the zoning bylaw. I should be reviewing that this week and looking to see, every time you make a change somewhere, it has a cascading effect on the rest of the document. So we want to make sure we've caught all of that. And that will be going to the bylaw study committee for review, just like any zoning amendment would. So that's another important thing to note, that this is going to go through the same process that any zoning change would go through. Our goal, no later than February 1st, is to get that draft to the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities for their pre-application review. And that just gives them a chance to look at what the town has done and say, yes, we think that this complies with the law or not. And if not, it gives you an opportunity to make some adjustments. February 1st is working on the deadline that the internal deadline that the state has given themselves to review these applications. Tracy and I were talking earlier, now that we're sort of towards the tail end of this process and a lot of communities have already gone through, I've found that their turnover time is getting faster. So hopefully it won't take the full time. But then, of course, we go to the planning board for public hearing, and then from there to town meeting. The goal of taking this to town meeting in May. And the nice thing about starting this process when you are, if anything goes wrong, if this is not approved at town meeting and people want to make further adjustments, you've got buffer. You can wait until fall to address this again and still have time to come into compliance before December 31st. So next slide. That is the big picture of where we are today, where we expect to be going, and happy to take any questions that you may have.
I have questions. You said requirements of the law, right? Could you explain that a little bit more? Like, when was this law put into place?
Oh my goodness, I'm trying to remember when the law was passed. So of course the law was passed
And by whom?
by the state legislature.
Okay.
And state legislature passed the law, and then it was up to the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities, formerly Housing and Community Development, to develop the standards and guidelines for the law, and that was released in 2022.
I know Charlie Baker signed it
Yeah.
into law, so it's been a while.
Then you said compliance deadline a few times.
Mm-hmm.
Walk me through some of the compliance deadlines. I understand this checklist. I'm looking at it. It's in front of me. It's not on that page, page 28. What are some of the repercussions for not getting to that compliance deadline?
Right now, we know that if you're not in compliance by the deadline, compliance simply means you've adopted zoning that the state deems compliant with the law by December 31st, 2025. That is the sum total of what that means. If you don't comply, the state has said there's a series of funding sources that you would not be eligible for. The Attorney General's office has suggested that.
What are those fundings?
I don't have that off the top of my head, but I can get you a list.
Please.
Anything else?
No. I do have more, but I'm sure.
No, I mean, this is obviously a hot topic, and there's much discussion on it. We are fortunate to be in the last tier, and where we don't need to make a decision, until this time next year, albeit we could before that. There's obviously some stuff going on with Milton. There were a lot of community votes in the last couple of weeks. I think most of them passed, with the exception of Duxbury. So there's a lot to be heard and a lot to be said. I know which way I'm leaning, but I'd like to have an open mind and fully understand the impact of the town, one way or the other. And I think we've got a couple of meetings coming up that we can do that. You guys pick the meetings how you want them, but I think December's crazy for a lot of people. So, one in December, one in January, I would, if you can forecast the weather and not pick a blizzard and things like that. But I think one in January would probably get bigger attendance than December, just from past experience. But yeah, this is a large topic, a lot to digest, and I don't like the state particularly telling us how to vote, and then tell you how to vote on top of that part. But
Makes
we
no
will,
sense.
no, it doesn't. But we are fortunate to be in the rear of this, and we are fortunate to, hopefully have a decision from the SJC before we need to make our decision to fully understand the impact of what our decision may or may not be. So the good news is we have time. We have an obligation to follow through on this, public meetings and comments and all that, all for that. And as a town, we'll come together as we always do, and make a decision. So.
Yeah, agreed. Like, what you said wasn't very aggressively toned. However, what's written down and what's coming at us seems a little bit aggressive. You know what I mean? And it's not what you said. It's not your tone, but it's just the words that are being written, compliance deadlines and bylaw, like a lot of serious implications, like we lose money, right? And it's like, how do you lose money for something for a vote? A vote is not necessarily supposed to be if you don't vote in my favor, you will lose this. That's
Agreed.
That's a little bit aggressive in my opinion.
So, but this gentleman's here just trying to get us,
I know.
just
I'm
trying to
not
get the
shooting-
process.
I'm not
Do not aim the darts and
Not shooting the messenger.
Mr. Davis's mess.
Shooting the messenger.
But, yeah, so our feelings towards the state, but thank you for the work that's been done, and thank everybody that's in this room that participated in this process. I do think if we do move forward, big if there, but if we do move forward, that location is an ideal location for this to take place. Proximity to Brockton, not only for utilities, but for transportation. It's also probably the closest part in town, or one of the closest parts in town to the Campello train station right there. So there's, which is what we're on the hook for. So it does, the location makes sense, whether or not everything else makes sense. I do think the location makes sense to me, so agreed. At this time, the planning board, zoning board, we got everybody here. I don't know if anybody, you're all of open meetings, so you can speak freely.
Well, I will, Chairman of the Planning Board, I'd like to thank Tracy, who's been putting an awful lot of work into this. It isn't that we agree with it. We don't like what's happened from Beacon Hill either. But she's put the work in, and she's come up with something. If we end up having to do it, I think it's a very good scheme. Some of the other things, areas we were looking at, just nothing was fitting in, and this really is a good area. But I agree with you. We don't like Beacon Hill telling us what to do and then telling us the money they took from us we're not going to give to you. So it's a two-pronged thing. But all in all, I think they're working on it, and if we have to have this, by the time we get all the bugs on it, I think we will have something we can do.
Agreed.
Thank you.
Thank you. Chip?
Mine, I've got a bunch of questions, but I'll limit it to one. How does this help us with meeting our 40B goals? Do you have the numbers on that? What's our existing and what would, if we approved, if 145 units go in, how does that help our 40B goal too? Because it seems like this is on top of everything else. But
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, so we're below our requirement. It would depend on the number of units that were developed and where we end up determining the threshold is to require the 10% subsidized housing. But any project that hit whatever threshold gets vetted through the bylaw process, we would benefit from those required 10%.
But would these all count towards the 10% or just?
No.
So we're just chasing our tail once again, and we're not making any progress with this. I mean, minimal progress towards our 40B.
Well, if they're rental properties though, if they're all rental units, then
they would qualify.
Then they would qualify. So you could actually make a decent chunk if the development were rental, which of course is not a requirement. That would be up to you to negotiate.
Jeff, are you saying then that, just use easy numbers, are you saying that if the town requires 10%, and it's approved at town meeting, and there's 150 apartments that are eventually built, that all 150 units will count towards the 40B quota, even though only 10% are deeded as such?
I'm gonna go back and make sure that I'm saying this correctly, but the law was fairly recently changed to where rental units count, I think it's a certain percentage of rental units, so it wouldn't count as 150 units, I believe. I think there's a calculation where a portion of non-deed restricted rentals count. So I'd have to go back and look at the exact law to calculate the credits. But it would be more than 15 units.
Building scene, but you're gonna gain that many more that we need. It just isn't gonna add up. All we're gonna do is be farther behind. If we were at 4%, now we'll be at 3%. We're losing ground, we're not gaining ground.
So long as more than, let's say you're 5% affordable housing, I don't know what the number is.
Yeah.
Closer to
4 something.
Yeah, say 5% to be safe.
So as long as the percentage of units in the development are more than that percentage, then you will not be falling farther behind.
I don't understand that. If you're gonna build, let's just say 140, 10% is 14, what happens to the other 125?
Yeah, so those, you would still be, so long as it's above the percentage that you currently have today, it would get you a little bit closer. You wouldn't be going backwards, but I hear what you're saying.
I don't see how you wouldn't be going backwards. You're putting in more units, which count for housing, which then that goes up. It doesn't, I don't know, maybe I'm just thick, but that's not adding up.
I promise the math works. I promise it does.
Yeah,
Okay.
But I agree, it doesn't
It's
get
not-
you
it's
more.
not.
It doesn't get you a
It's-
whole lot.
it's
but
extreme-
It does push it a little bit
It's
more.
extremely marginal.
Yeah.
It's
but
not a
yes.
leap forward.
No,
No,
it's
not
by no
even-
means.
It's not gonna solve our problem.
No.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Not even close.
But it won't,
No, there's zero.
It's not gonna.
No, I won't make
work.
it.
Right, if they count 100%, then great.
Like a 40B, if the
Right.
rental's 100%.
So you're only getting 10% out of that. Doesn't make sense to me. Another thing that just doesn't make sense in all this. So,
It's a state.
you figure it out.
We have 3 minutes before this board has to go into a public meeting. So I don't know if anybody else has, if anybody has an important question or two. We still have time.
I'd
I
like
just,
to just offer what you said, thank Tracy. She's done a great job. I've sat through all those, and she really put a lot into it. We all did, but, she was over and above.
Yeah, you're very fortunate. You've got great staff.
we know that.
Good.
Thank you.
Tom Bardo zoning. I understand the committee's put a lot of work in selecting where the district would go. Is there anything that would prevent the district from going on town land, so then any development could be voted on by the taxpayers at a later date? The town would have to actually sell the land.
Yeah, no, we looked at that, and one of the restrictions is it cannot be on town land.
Unless you're like very explicit that you're gonna use that town land for housing.
Correct.
So what if the town sold the land?
Right.
If
Yeah,
we zoned
it's
it, the
a-
town could sell the land.
I think the fear behind it was that everybody would put it on town land and then therefore have site control and actually never allow it to be built. So the only caveat, is that you would have to display that it would be developed if it's on town land, and understand, although all of us have challenging concerns with the legislation, as Jeff has reiterated multiple times, is that as currently constituted, there is no guarantee that the housing will be developed if placed on private land. It's an overlay that allows that flexibility to be developed. If it's on town land, then it, for all intents and purposes, must be developed, because you're gonna have to display a plan to, I assume, the Attorney General's office through the process to show that it will be developed. So, it actually would not be beneficial to target that land.
I got one other question. So we just say that's what we're gonna put. We vote on it, but that's gonna be our overlay. How long before they come along and tell us we have to go? Wouldn't that be next?
So that would require a change in legislation, but
I mean,
obviously,
We get everything else jammed at us, wouldn't that be nice? Okay, you got that, now you gotta build it. Okay.
I don't think you're wrong, but
Anything's possible.
Right.
is there any other discussion as it relates to the presentation?
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Well, Lucini, I just had I know you spoke on the funds themselves there. Do you have a rough estimate, and does that fluctuate per town, per city? Is there a set rate that you guys go by to determine those funds?
I don't know what funds you're referring to.
The funds that would lose.
Yeah.
That would be withheld, correct?
I don't know, you'd have to look through your records and see how many of those sources you said.
So-
recently.
So, we were required, I believe it was in January of 2022, that we had to make an initial presentation to the Board of Selectmen as part of this process. So at that time, in studying it, we had done that calculation. And at that time, the legislation that had been approved was fairly limited as to what the governor's discretion would be on withholding grant funds in the future, primarily tied to Mass Works grants. And I had inquired in at least over a 10-year run, the town of West Bridgewater had never qualified for any of those grants. So it would seem on face value that there would be very little recourse. However, the governor has indicated that she's going to look to broaden that discretion. She certainly has de facto authority in the legislature since she has a supermajority in both chambers. And as Jeff initially started to state, but then probably wisely decided not to say more, but that the Attorney General is also looking at implementing further measures. My personal reading of that is that I don't think that she has the authority because it would require legislative approval, but refer back to Section 1 that they have a supermajority in both chambers. So again, my guess is that you will probably see either out of the outcome of the Milton case or some further clarification that they're going to look to broaden that discretionary authority for people that do not comply. Jeff, I don't know if you disagree with any of that, but
No,
you're
I
closer.
think that's absolutely right. And again, your job, you can decide whatever works best for your community, right? And I'm just here to give you options
And we do appreciate that.
to meet the law if you want to.
Did Middleborough vote against it too?
Yes.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
Thank you. All right, at this time, this board has to move to a public hearing. So if there's no other discussion, I assume, Mr. Lucini, do you need to close your meeting? And Mr. Hurley's in question, I guess.
Take a vote to close the meeting. Motion, all in favor? Aye. Okay, we're closed.
I'll take a vote to move our meeting to our regular scheduled time.
So,
We have a
super.
motion, do we have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Thanks. So
Unanimous.
both boards, thank you, because we saved some money by doing this all together versus
Just to let the town know, saving money.
so, thank you. Thank you all.
Yeah.
It's- Nice try.
See you.
Good night.
Yeah, we're the 7 o'clock. Yeah. Yeah, it'll be somewhat painful.
Have a good night.
Okay.
Thank you guys. Drive safe,
Well,
Jim.
I
You just got that.
I think she was.
Oh, you can't see anything?
We're all blurred.
Yeah.
How'd I know?
Yeah.
Of course you will. Let me know.
All right. At this time, I'm going to read a public notice, then request we open a public meeting and go from there. So pursuant to sections of Chapter 40, Section 56, Mass General Law, notice is hereby given that the Board of Selectmen will hold a public hearing on Wednesday, November 20th, 2024 at 7 p.m. in the Eldon F. Marrero Board of Selectmen Meeting Room, Town Hall, 65 Main Street, West Bridgewater, Massachusetts, to consider the issue of adopting the residential factor and tax levy percentages, specifically the issue of adopting a local property tax levy amongst the 5 property classes residential, open space, commercial, industrial, and personal property for the fiscal year of 2025. Interested parties are invited to be present and to be heard. Board of Selectmen, Jeff Ryan, Chair. So at this time, I'll take a motion to open the public hearing.
Make a motion to open the public hearing?
Is it a roll call vote?
No.
No, okay.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. You're up. So Paula and Daniela,
Yes.
the floor is yours.
Wonderful. It should be reasonably painless.
Famous last words.
Exactly. Well, it will be for me. Daniela has put, I just want to say Daniela has put a lot of time, because as you know, she is our new assessor. She was the clerk for several years. She's put a lot of time and effort into this, and she's done a great job, and I just want it noted that we were on time. We were not late. We had no major dilemmas or disasters that affected us from not being here on time, and that is all because of her.
We appreciate that.
Thank you.
And the staff, of course, but it had nothing to do with the board, it was all them. So with that being said, I will, since she did all this, I will let her talk about what we have here.
Hi.
Hello.
So, first page is the reason why we're here. It's the classic packet that everyone's kind of familiar with, but we're here to adopt a tax levy between the properties, different classes within West Bridgewater. And we're asking that you vote on split tax rate this year again. So on the next page, we have our value for the town. And it's always pretty consistent, about 70% residential and about 30% between the commercial, industrial, and personal property. So that's stayed the same again this year. And on the next page is the actual valuations between all the classes. So class 1 is residential and class 3 is commercial, 4 is industrial, and 5 is personal property. And there's a little chart at the bottom showing how it's changed over the last few years.
So obviously some solid growth, residential, minimal growth in industrial and commercial, similar to last year, basically.
Yes. And on the next page is a comparison over the last few years, from 2020 to 2025. So we're looking at, under residential on this page, it just looks at single family homes, so only our 101s. So that's obviously the most popular. So that's the valuation. And that has increased a little over 8%, almost 9% from last year. So the average single family home assessment's now 532,971. Commercial, the new average value is the 1167085, so that's about 7.33% increase. And for industrial, the average value is 2002617. That actually had a little bit of a bump, so we're at 17.23 increase in industrial this year. Last year, you guys had voted on 1.46 split, so we used that as the estimate on the tax rate for this page. So that's where the 13.67 tax rate and the 24.55 is coming in, just to show what the average tax bill would be and how that percentage-wise has changed over the years. So with that, it comes to 4.78 for our residential, 3.90 for our commercial, and 13.48% increase for our industrial. And on the next page is the chart of all the different shifts that you can do and how it would affect the tax bill for our residents. The blue is the residential, the pink is the commercial, and yellow is the industrial. Again, it's just noted that in last year, fiscal 24, it was 1.46 split, so that's why it's noted over to the side. And all the pages behind that are the same chart, just broken down, so it's a little easier to read. And then it also breaks down not only the annual increase, but what the quarterly increase would be. Class.
Discussion from the board?
Still digesting it a little bit.
Sure, take your time.
think I asked last year, but you guys don't recommend anything, right, coming from your board?
No, we do not.
My thoughts are either going to leaving it the same or going to 1.47.
6.
Or leaving it the same or going up.
Oh, I'm sorry.
1%. Or 1/10 or whatever. That's what my thoughts are.
You say up or down? I'm sorry.
1.47, you said?
Yeah.
Okay.
Or leaving it the same at 1.46.
Yeah. I'm inclined to leave it at 1.46.
I don't dislike 1.47, but
Guys,
I'm okay with 1.46.
it's up to you guys. I look at those last few tenths of it or hundredths of a digit.
Yeah.
While times are not very good right now, they could get worse. If they get worse, we have nowhere to go.
Yeah.
But 1.47, is somewhat of probably a proper reaction to today's economy. It really leaves us limited in the future. So
I'm just concerned with what we have coming down the pipe with
Mhm.
potential tax increases with water, and I know we're years away from school, but school, got a lot coming, so I'm concerned about that. But I am okay with the 1.46.
whatever you guys, we vote. Any thoughts?
No, I'm going 1.46 or 1.47. I like 1.47 a little better.
Make the motion if you like.
Make a motion to move the split to 1.47.
We're all looking at me. Okay. I'm okay with the 1.46. I would rather the 1.46.
You want me to remake my motion?
I would just.
I'll make my motion.
You can make any motion you want. I would just make a different motion after I voted against your motion.
Make a motion to move the split to 1.46.
Second, keeping
Keeping it the same.
split at 1.46.
Keeping it the same.
Okay. Any further discussion?
Nope.
What about you,
All-
Jeff?
I've been fine at 1.46 all along. I would have, but I think I understand it's an increase. I understand increase hurts. But it's a small increase. Consider the significant amount that we keep increasing at town meeting. And we are lucky to have that industrial and commercial base to offset some of this increase. But this is appropriate based on how we spend at town meetings. So I'm fine with that. So at this point,
Second?
at this point, we'll entertain a vote.
All in favor? Aye, we're all in favor.
Aye. Okay. At this time, I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing. Hearing no discussion. Sorry.
Make a motion to close the public hearing?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
At this point, I do not believe we have anything else on the agenda other than we have done a public comment period earlier, and we have some, Al's here on behalf of the entire public. I don't know if there's nope, we're good. So at this point, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second. Oh, make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
It's been a
Meeting
day.
adjourned.
It's
Thank
been a
you.
day.